Hello, my name is Dylan Fike, and this is my presentation on Charles Manson. His early life, born on November 12, 1934, Charles Miles Maddox was the son of Kathleen Maddox, who was an alcoholic and a prostitute. He was born in Cincinnati, Ohio, and at the age of 12, Charles was placed into a boys' home because of his continued issues in his house. He relentlessly tried to live with his mother, but was rejected multiple times, and then just began living on the streets. Here are some facts about Charles Manson. He was a whopping 5'2", and when he was born, he was given no name. His name was put down by the nurses as No Name Maddox. Charles Manson has written many songs whom artists such as Rob Zombie, Guns N' Roses, and of course, Marilyn Manson have recorded. He claimed to be a part of the Church of Scientology and even claimed to be Jesus to his followers. Here's a picture of Manson in 1969 with his luscious beard and his luscious Goldilocks. He had a very troubled life. After he began living street to street, he began a life of crime. He first began with simple petty crimes around stores and buildings. Throughout the following 20 years, he was in and out of prisons and reform schools. He was released from prison on the final time before his hellacious murders on March 21st, 1967. He then moved to San Francisco, California. Some facts about his wives and children. In 1955, in between his multiple prison sentences, Manson married Rosalie Jean Willis, a 17-year-old hospital waitress. They had a child named Charles Manson Jr., and Willis later moved away with her son and divorced Charles Manson. Their son later committed suicide in the 1990s via gunshot wound. In 1959, Manson married a prostitute named Leona Ray Candy Stevens. He had a second son named Charles Luther Manson, who is still living today under a different name. Stevens then divorced Manson in 1963. The Manson family cult. It was created by Charles Manson in 1960. It consisted of over 100 members who were followers to Charles. He had them brainwashed to believe that he was the new Messiah to all, and they all lived on Spahn Ranch together. They had a very unconventional lifestyle with a habitual use to hallucinogenic drugs like LSD. They did any and all things that Charles asked of them to do. He had them convinced that he had life figured out and everything was going to be okay, and after the judgment day of all, they would all be safe in his secret world under the desert. Crazy. On August 8th and 9th, 1969, the Manson family, on orders from Charles, murdered 5 individuals, one of them being pregnant actress Sharon Tate. There were many key members to this family, and we will go through them. First up, we have Susan Atkins. Born on May 7th, 1948, in San Gabriel, California. She was born to very alcoholic parents and had a very troubled family life. Once her mother died of cancer, her father left her, and in 1967, Manson asked her to join his commune. She was charged with killing Sharon Tate alone and stated she did not know why she did it. She ended up dying of brain cancer in 2009. This is a picture of Susan Atkins at trial. Next up, we have Leslie Van Houten. Born on August 23, 1949, in Los Angeles, California, Houten had been using drugs since she was 15 years old and ran away from home multiple times. Her mother forced her to get an abortion at 17 years old, and she fled to a hippie commune after that, which is where she had met Charles Manson. She was 19 when she was charged with the murders of the La Biancas, and she had been denied parole 20 times, the latest of them being this past January of 2020. Next up, we have Patricia Krenwinkel. Born on December 3, 1947, in Los Angeles, California, Krenwinkel grew up as a troubled, overweight child who was bullied all through high school. Shortly after meeting Manson, they had sexual relations. At 21, she was convinced of stabbing Folger 28 times and Rosemary 16 times, writing "death to pigs" in their blood on the walls. This is a picture of her with actually a swastika carved into her head. And, that's actually an upside-down cross on her head on the way to trial. Next up, we have Charles Watson. He was born on December 2nd, 1945, in Farmersville, Texas. He was a star student and an athlete. He attended college at the University of North Texas, and after college, he had gotten a job as a baggage handler at an airline, which gave him access to free airfare. He flew to Los Angeles and got immersed into the music and drug scene, soon meeting women who were in the Manson family. He led the charge in the La Bianca murders and claimed himself as the devil, referring to himself specifically as Lucifer to the other family members. He flew to Texas and avoided extradition for 9 months before being sentenced to life in Sacramento, California. Next up, we have Bobby Beausoleil. It's hard to say. Born on November 6, 1947, in Santa Barbara, California. At the age of 15, he was sent to a reform camp for juvenile behavior. Soon he fled to Los Angeles and got involved with the music scene, where he had met Hinman, a Manson follower. When the Tate murders happened, Bobby was already in jail for murdering Gary Hinman, which Manson ordered him to do on the account that he had thought that Gary Hinman had snitched to the police about what was going on. This is a photo of Bobby on the way to trial. Next up, we got this rough-looking fella, Steve Clem Grogan. Born on July 13th, 1951, in California. He was an artistically inclined high school dropout who was involved in many petty crimes before joining the quote-unquote family. Manson ordered Grogan and another member to murder Donald Shee, and after he was believed to snitch to police about the family's criminal activity as well as Gary Hinman. He was given a life sentence and eventually parole in 1985 for revealing the location of Donald Shee's remains. Next up, this was the mugshot of Steve Clem Grogan. Again, rough. Next up, we have, in my opinion, one of the, if not, other than Charles Manson, the most important member of the Manson family cult. This is Linda Kasabian. This photo is her as a witness in trial against all of them, with her in the press and this guy with really sick sideburns. She was born on June 21st, 1949, in Biddeford, Maine. She moved to Los Angeles in 1968 and met Manson through a hippie. She then moved to Spahn Ranch with Manson and others. She enjoyed Manson's messages at first, but then realized they were violent. She never took part in any murder, instead staying in the car or keeping watch during all of them. She turned herself into the police and became the lead witness in trials and received complete and all immunity. Charles Manson and the relationship to Helter Skelter. Manson was influenced by many things, such as drugs, television, peers, and everyone around him, but one of the most notable is music, specifically the band The Beatles. Manson took their song Helter Skelter in a very different way than most. He had a very strong belief in Armageddon and the book of Revelations from the Bible. He had a deep love for the Church of Scientology and explored many different churches. He was a very pathologically deluded and wanted nothing more than for the planet to turn into a sort of hell, if not hell itself. Next, we have Charles Manson and his connection with the Beach Boys. Before Manson went on his vicious murder spree, which he actually did not commit any of the murders, Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys allowed him and several other members of the family to stay in his house after picking up 2 girls from hitchhiking. It was through this connection that Manson got to audition for Terry Melcher, the son of Doris Day, who was very, very good friends with the Beach Boys. He wasn't signed, which angered him, but while in the house, Manson did write many songs. The Beach Boys recorded one of them originally called Cease to Exist, later changed into a single B-side called Never Learn Not to Love. Manson's arrest. Even though you may think that all of these crimes would have left enough evidence for the police to arrest them, they were very, very clueless to Manson being involved in all of these. They were clueless to the heinous crimes committed. Manson and the family were actually arrested for suspicion that they had vandalized a portion of the Death Valley National Park. It was through the confession of Susan Atkins, who was being held for the connection of the murder of Gary Hinman, that they believed Manson was involved in the other killings. The main reason people believed Manson committed these acts was his pathological ego. He believed he was Jesus and that the world was going to crumble. The trial. During the trial, Manson released an album called Lie to help raise money for his defense. He showed up to court one day with an X carved into his forehead. The female members of the family soon followed as well as shaving their heads. The X's later turned into swastikas. They often giggled and laughed, showing no remorse for their crimes. On January 25th, 1971, Charles Manson was sentenced to death for his crimes, but later his sentence was changed to life in prison due to California banning the death penalty. The only member to be given immunity was Linda Kasabian. All others were given life in prison. Manson's death. Charles Manson died on November 19th, 2017 of natural causes. At the time, he had been in prison for more than 40 years for his crimes. Just days earlier, Manson was admitted to the hospital for reasons unknown. This is a side-by-side photo. This one is Manson with just the X on his head. He's younger, obviously, with his beard and whatnot. But this photo, I don't know if you guys can see it because the quality is kind of rough. But he has a swastika on his head, which, again, was later carved during the trial. And in my opinion, he is one of the most sadistic serial killers to ever walk Earth. And yeah, thank you very much for watching my presentation. And these are my sources. All images were taken from Google.